everyone, this is Lecture 7, Chapter 14 on Education. There are other topics within this chapter, but we will only be covering the education portion. The learning objectives for the education portion are to compare schooling in high, middle, and low-income societies, apply the structural, functional, social interaction, and social conflict theories to schooling. We'll also discuss dropping out, violence, and other problems facing today's schools. And we'll summarize the debate over the performance of U.S. schools and the various ways we talk about addressing those performance issues. Does the odds of going to college simply reflect a personal desire for more schooling in the United States? Probably not, as those people who have personal resources in their lives to help them get to college are better off than those people who do not have those resources. Not just money, but also what we call cultural capital. If you have a good guidance counselor at your high school that know the ins and outs of applying to college and applying to financial aid, you of course will be better off than those students at high schools who don't have the better guidance counselors. Or if you're in a family where lots of people in your family themselves went and finished college, they can serve as resources for you in terms of telling you how to apply for college, how to apply for financial aid, what colleges to target if you're interested in a specific subject, things of that nature. So personal desire is definitely important, but there are other types of resources that are important as well in determining who gets to go to college in the United States, and probably in most of the rich countries of the world, or the high-income countries. The extent of schooling is tied to the level of economic development. Lots of people say that the richer countries are richer, and the richer countries in the world are richer because they spend more money on educating their populations. There are other people who argue, yes, there is a tie between schooling and economic development, but the first argument is backwards. Countries first get rich and then decide to spend some resources on educating the population. So there's correlation between schooling and economic development according to both arguments, but the causation is different. Countries educate and then get rich is one argument. The other argument is countries get rich and then choose to educate. So causation is something that's still theorized about. In low-income countries, there's limited schooling, as these countries don't have the funds to pay for lots of schools and to pay for the education of lots of people. Also, in lower and middle-income countries, children in the families in these countries may not have the time to go to school because their families need them to work. Worldwide, almost 1/3 of all children never reach secondary grades, and about 1/6 of the world's people cannot read or write. And surprisingly, about 10 million adults in the United States cannot read or write. Education itself is a social institution through which society provides its members important knowledge, including basic facts, job skills, and cultural norms and values. Schooling is formal instruction under the direction of specially trained teachers. Informal instruction happens outside of school. It can happen in your home, amongst your friends. You can learn about all kinds of things in all kinds of places. We divide the world. We used to divide the world into first, second, and third world nations. Now we divide them into high, middle, and low-income countries. High-income countries include the United States, of course, along with its capitalistic and democratic peers in Western Europe, Australia, Japan, and South Korea, as well as Canada. So those are the high-income countries. In middle-income countries, like the high-income countries, child labor is outlawed, but some families in middle-income countries need their children to work to bring in money. In middle-income countries such as India, education is shaped by patriarchy, so what resources a family has, they usually use to educate their sons. And in secondary education, or high school education, in India, 60% of the students are males, and 60% of the students are boys, with the 6% difference being adult males who are still pursuing secondary education. In Japan, which is a high-income country like the United States, industrialization brought mandatory education in 1872. Industrialization enabled countries to not have to depend upon as many workers, and so it was decided that the younger people, instead of looking for jobs, would go off to school. In Japan, early grades focus on traditions, and competitive examinations can decide a student future. When I lived in Seattle many years ago, I had a girlfriend who taught English as a second language to students who were in Seattle to learn English. In Japan, students with GPAs that we would consider a B plus actually don't get to go to college. They end up going to trade school. So my girlfriend at the time was actually teaching Japanese students with B plus averages English so that they could get jobs in the hospitality industry. Whereas here in the United States, if you barely graduate high school, you can still go to community college. And if you do well in your first year of community college, you can then transfer to just about any college in the United States. In Japan, there's a 96% high school graduation rate, and 50% of high school graduates go on to college. And Japan has high rankings in mathematics and science. Surprisingly, the United States has middling rankings in mathematics and science and in language. The United States was among the first nations in the world to set a goal of mass education, shaped by a high standard of living. As the United States got rich, it had a lot of resources and decided to use those resources to educate its population. And democratic principles were important as well. It is thought that people would be better voters or better able to participate in the democratic process if they have received an education. Education is also important in the United States as it is used to promote equal opportunity and to provide practical learning for people who want to pursue particular jobs. In terms of equal opportunity, the father of public education in the United States was a gentleman named Horace Mann, who was also the first president of my undergraduate college, Antioch College, which is in southwestern Ohio. Horace Mann believed that education was the great equalizer, and anyone in the United States that received a good education should be able to pursue any opportunity that they wanted to. And then when thinking about practical learning, some people complain that the United States is problematic in that its education doesn't really teach all of the practical things that a person needs to be a successful adult, like personal finance, for instance. Under the structural functionalist perspective, which of course is concerned about how institutions help sustain and maintain the operations of society. So structural functionalists look at socialization. If you think about when you first went off to school for the first time, either kindergarten or preschool, you had to learn how to socialize with people who were not members of your family, people who lived in different parts of town, people who may have been of a different race or of a different class. Cultural innovation also happens in education. Historically, in Western economies, it was white males who got to receive education, but eventually education opened up to people of color and women as well. There's social integration that happens in school. Even though folks come from many different backgrounds within the United States, when you go off to school, you learn United States history, which is one of the ways that we all get integrated into being members of this culture. Schools also can assist with social placement. If people do well in school, they can actually have social mobility out of the class that they were born into. And then sometimes there's a negative role that school and social placement takes when it's determined that only people who went to certain schools get to have certain jobs. And schools also provide latent functions as well. Manifest functions are socialization, cultural innovation, social integration, and social placement, but latent functions are those things that you don't think that schools are doing, but they actually are doing. So, like I was saying before, socialization is exposure to those basic cultural things that we all share. Um, Cultural innovation is the creation and transmitting of culture to people beyond white males. Social integration is the molding diverse nation together through shared norms and values. And social placement is the enhancing of meritocracy and providing a path to upward social mobility. Latent functions of school are providing child care. In a capitalist society, employers need lots of people to work. If parents are able to send those children to someplace safe, then those parents are able to leave the home and go off to work. So that's one of the latent functions of schooling. Schooling provides a place for young people to be at a time in their lives when jobs aren't necessarily plentiful. So having kids in school and having education being compulsory takes people out of the workforce and keeps unemployment numbers down. Schooling can provide a stage for establishing relationship and networks. Since I've been at Troy, I've seen a number of occasions where students have shared job search tips or tips about job openings at the various places that they work, which is extremely important. And then schools also link students to career opportunities. If you have not yet made an appointment to visit with or make an online connection with Career Resource Center, I would recommend that you do that early in your college career as opposed to waiting till the last year. Job searches are not linear, so in your mind you may be thinking, get into college, complete college, then look for a job. Once you're in college, you want to make connections to the Career Resource Center as soon as possible so that once you tell them of things that you're interested, as they come in, they can alert you to those opportunities. If you don't have a relationship with the Career Resource Center, some perfect job for you that they know of, they may not be able to relay that information to you because you haven't talked to them. An evaluation or critique of the functionalist approach. This approach stresses the ways that education supports the operation of modern society, but it overlooks the variance in student and teacher behavior within multiple settings. That's something that's done in the symbolic interaction approach. The structural functionalist approach also does not address problems of the educational system and the reproduction of class structure across generations. Remember, for structural functionalists, they argue that there is a reason why we have classes in various societies. Some jobs are more important than others, and those jobs that are more important, the people who hold them get paid more. And the structural functionalists don't really challenge the educational system. It might suggest reforms, but it definitely does not suggest it should be done away with or changed too drastically. Under the symbolic interaction approach, this suggests situations that people define as real become real in their consequences, or the self-fulfilling prophecy of the sociologist Robert K. Merton, Merton. What can happen in school if teachers determine that a kid is a bad kid or a dumb kid, then they may be less likely to help that person with their problem or to be a success in school. If a child has been deemed to be bright, but has a subject or two where they aren't necessarily that comfortable doing that well, the teachers just assume that they'll get through it and don't offer any help to them either. Self-fulfilling prophecy can demonstrate beliefs about inferiority and superiority and that are built into existing systems of inequality. So if you are a person that has a bias against people who are different than you, you will assume that those people are not as good as you. And if you're their teachers, that's bad, because if they need help, you're probably not going to be very likely to help them. The critique or evaluation of this symbolic interactionist theory as it relates to education. Symbolic interaction stresses the ways that education supports the operation of modern societies of, oh, wait a minute. This is the same slide as structural functionalism. Let's just go on to the social conflict theory. which emphasizes the ways in which schooling causes and perpetuates social inequality. So, in opposition to the structural functionalist theory, social conflict theory says maybe we should do away with our current education system, since it engages in social control. It teaches people how to be obedient as much as it teaches people how to attain self-development. There's standardized testing. Standardized tests are created by people who historically have done very well at school, who create tests to help highlight other people who have done well at school. So people who have received substandard educations don't necessarily do as well on standardized tests as those who have received the best education, and this can be bad. School tracking can be bad as well. In the past, schools would give their students tests when they entered the 9th grade, and depending upon how a person did on the test, they get tracked into college prep, which is usually the highest tracks for various careers, and then the lowest track was the people who have developmental disabilities or need some kind of special ed. Tracking is bad if you have the desire to go to college, but you've been tracked into the culinary arts or auto mechanics or home ec track. Not knocking those tracks, but if you're in a track that you don't want to be in, then that's negative. Also, these days, tracking isn't as rigid as it used to be. Even in schools that have tracking, students are asked at the beginning of every year if they want to continue in the track that they've already been studying within. If they'd like to change, nowadays they're given the opportunity to do so. Another problem with tracking is that those children from upper middle income families whose parents had attended college, those kids always seem to end up in the top track. And the working class kids whose parents who didn't go to college always ended up in the lowest track, even if their test scores show that the lower income kids should be in the highest track, or the kids from the high income background actually tested into a lower track. So school tracking had a lot of unfairness built into it in the past. Critique or evaluation of social conflict theory. This theory minimizes the extent that schooling can actually enhance upward social mobility for talented men and women from all backgrounds. And one positive of social conflict theory is that it suggests today's college curricula, including sociology courses, challenges social inequity on many fronts. You can learn about societal inequity in the various ways it manifests itself by taking sociology as well as other social science and humanities classes. In the United States, we have both public and private education. 90% of primary and secondary students attend public schools in the United States. The other 10% attend private schools, and of those private schools, 40% of them are Catholic schools, 38% of them are other religious affiliated schools, and 22% attend non-religious schools. I myself have attended private schools. From kindergarten to 6th grade public school, from 7th to 12th grade private. My undergraduate degrees were at a private school. My first master's at a public school, second master's at a private school, PhD from a public school. So my education has been about half and half public and private. There's inequality in public schooling because of unequal funding, which results in unequal resources. There's an public education advocate by the name of Jonathan Kozol, who wrote a book about savage inequalities that you can check out of the Troy Library if you want to read about that, if you have an interest in public education. And because of unequal funding, there's a great variability found in teacher salaries across districts, costs per student spent, money spent on busing. Home environment and community involvement are important as well. Supportive home environments are important for student and school success. And the more that communities are involved with the running of the schools, the more that those communities are going to want to back their schools with tax dollars, and to make sure that the teachers and administrators in those running those schools are doing a good job. In the past, we had busing in the United States to bus kids from school districts that seem to be overly represented by a particular race. But most busing in the United States has ended, as school desegregation isn't as important an issue as it used to be. Access to higher education is important, as we know that people who have BAs make more money than people who just have high school diplomas. So schooling is the main path to good jobs in the United States. But family income often blocks access to higher education. But in the United States, we have federal programs to assist people to pay for college. There's state programs, and then each individual college in the United States also has its own abilities to help people with meeting the cost of attending college. Economic differences between white families and minority families can widen the education gap. But like I was saying before, in the United States, we have a number of programs at various levels to help people who don't have a lot of economic means make it to college and graduate from college. So, like I was saying before, we have government funding for college. We also have community colleges, which are open admission, or you at least have to have graduated from high school, with relatively low tuitions. They are special importance for minorities, in that you can spend a year at a community college, get a taste of what college life is like without spending the same amount of money that you would spend at a four-year school. Community colleges are really local, but a lot of them, the better ones anyway, will even attract students from abroad. And at a community college, faculty is focused primarily on teaching, whereas at research universities like the University of Alabama or Auburn University, faculty must be focused on teaching as well as research. At teaching universities like Troy, I have to do all three. I have to do three main things. I have to do teaching, I have to do research, not so much because I'm only a lecturer, and then I also have to provide service to my department. So in addition to teaching this class and other classes, I am also the faculty advisor to a student group on the Troy Montgomery campus called the Social Justice Club. Problems in school include discipline and violence. Many believe schools need to teach discipline because it is felt that some homes aren't teaching the children within those homes good discipline. And discipline, of course, is not just necessary for the school environment, but once a person finally leaves school and goes off in the work world, they need discipline to get to the job, get things done on time, things of that nature. In terms of violence within school, a lot of places have zero tolerance policies in terms of acts of violence, or if a child brings a weapon to school. Unfortunately, some ridiculous things have happened. Little kids in elementary school who have brought arrowheads to show and tell have been kicked out of school because those arrowheads have been considered a weapon, which is ridiculous. Kids who lasso on the playground have been accused of engaging in violence, and they've been kicked out of schools. And when little boys or little girls kiss each other in kindergarten, this has been considered, these acts have been considered harassment, and kids have been kicked out of school for that. So of course we want to keep violence out of schools, to look after, make sure that we have safe environments for our children to learn in, but we're not supposed to be ridiculous with the zero tolerance policies, in my opinion. Let's see. It is thought that large bureaucratic schools undermine education. Like any bureaucracy, if it's been doing things in a particular way for a long time, it's going to be unlikely to want to change. Schools have been too concerned about student performance on standardized tests, and they teach to the test as opposed to providing truly educational learning environments. There's probably a little bit too much specialization in terms of what we teach students now. We should be teaching students not only what they need to be taught, but how to be good learners, not just while they're in school, but throughout their lives. And then there's some people who say that there's little individual responsibility on the part of students, especially from those families who don't seem to value education. Problems in schools don't just occur in the primary, secondary levels, but also in the post-secondary or college level. Passivity is common among college and university students. A lot of students just like to take classes, do whatever it is they need to do to get a particular grade. And so when they come to class, they don't engage in discussions with the professor. But most students think that classroom passivity is their own fault. Unfortunately, students find little value in classroom discussion, but teaching strategies can enhance the classroom environment. There are a number of things that I do to get as many students as possible to discuss in class, as well as to make them feel comfortable discussing in class. A lot of people are intimidated when they first come to college and are not comfortable making comments in class. But in my in-person classes, I try to work around those issues. Dropout rate continues to be a problem. It's linked to social problems. A lot of students, for various reasons, don't engage in school, don't want to be there. A lot of students may drop out of school because they need to work. The dropout rate has declined slightly in recent decades, though. The gap between the white dropout rate and the Hispanic and African American dropout rates has closed drastically in terms of the official numbers, but some people argue that the dropout rate is probably 2 times higher than government's numbers, as it is difficult to keep track of a student after he or she has been truant for a long amount of time. The most serious educational issue confronting society today, according to some people, is the quality of schooling. Because of the United States' marginal performance in basic skills in reading, science, writing, logic, and mathematics. When we compare test results of U.S. students versus students from other rich countries, the U.S. is sort of a middling performer as opposed to a top performer, even though we spend in the top 5, we spend per capita money on students. And 1 in 3 U.S. children is functionally illiterate, which is unfortunate because, as you all know, if you have a problem with literacy, you're probably not going to want to go to school or even go about getting help if you do want to go to school. A Nation at Risk was a report that recommended that each student complete several years of English, mathematics, social studies, general science, computer science, and computer science. There should be no promotions without achievement of standards. If you don't deserve to be promoted to the next grade, you don't get promoted. There's supposed to be improved teacher training and compensation. And teachers should not just be thinking that they need to get a particular credential, but they also need to get training and experience that the public expects of them to be good teachers. So the teachers shouldn't just be concerned about the rules as established by the teachers union, but they should also be concerned about the communities that they teach within, what those communities and the parents of the students in those communities, what they want. Grade inflation has been a problem. Teachers are concerned about getting good evaluations, so if you're concerned about that, you give higher grades even if a student doesn't deserve it. And it happens at the high school level as well. At the college level, you don't want, especially if you're not a full-time faculty member, if you're taught by adjuncts at the college level and that adjunct wants to keep his or her teaching job, he or she is more likely to give high grades and not so as not to get any complaints from students. At the high school level, parents are concerned about their kids getting into college, so the teachers are pressured to give higher grades even if they're not deserved. School choice is a big issue in the United States now, especially with the naming of, or the confirmation of Betsy DeVos, who's from my home state of Michigan, a big proponent of charter schools in the state of Michigan. As it is thought that school choice creates a market for schooling so parents and students can shop for the best value. If we have school choice, as opposed to just saying if you live in a particular district, you just go to this particular school. If parents actually have choice, they will choose to go to the school that best serves their children, and eventually the better schools will get more resources than the schools that are not very good. But it is thought that school choice programs can erode the national commitment to public education, especially in urban schools. For instance, in my social problems class, we look at two types of charter schools in the United States. We're keeping in mind that charter schools are public schools, but instead of being run by the local school board, they're run by private sector education companies. So in my social problems class, we compare schools in the Harlem Children's Zone, which is a very successful charter school program, to charter schools in Detroit, which has lots of charter schools, but none of them are very good. Or the ones that are very good skirt the rules and don't make an attempt to educate everyone, even though the law says that they're supposed to. So competition in most things is good, but competition where you have lots of competitors, but none of the competitors are very good, that's not necessarily a good thing at all. Magnet schools are public schools that have special facilities and programs to promote educational excellence in a particular area. Some of you may have attended a performing or fine arts magnet school, a science and technology, mathematics magnet school, or magnet schools that eventually will put people in healthcare or the culinary arts. Charter schools are also public schools, but they have more freedom to try new policies and programs, as these charter schools are run by private sector education groups as opposed to local school boards. So charter schools are supported with public schools supported with tax dollars, but they are not run by the local school board. And we also have charter schools that are run by for-profit school systems who believe that they can cut costs and run a school at a lower cost than what the local public school district can. Homeschooling is another option for people, and it involves more school-age children than magnet schools, charter schools, and for-profit schools combined. Troy University actually has a number of homeschooling partners. There are homeschooling sports leagues, and they have their games and practices in Troy facilities. There are homeschool bands where the kids get together, all the homeschool kids get together at Troy University here in Montgomery, and they meet in a performance space and they have practices and they do concerts and what have you, like kids would do who attended a traditional public school. School choice has resulted in better results, but some cons is that these choices remove some of the most affluent and articulate parents out of the system. These affluent and articulate parents are important because they themselves have had some success in education and know what successful educational institutions look like and can influence schools to be better if they're found lacking. Half of the children with disabilities are in special facilities, and the rest of the other half attend public schools through mainstreaming, which integrates students with disabilities or special needs into the overall educational program. Mainstreaming works best for the physically impaired students who can keep up academically, but the developmentally disabled usually, not always, but usually end up in classrooms with special teachers who have been trained to deal with their developmental disabilities. Adult education is important in the United States, as about 40% of students in degree-granting programs are older students or not of traditional age, not 18 to 24, not right out of high school. Adults return to the classroom for various reasons. I imagine within this class there are a number of you who have returned to school to advance in a career. You needed a degree to work for a new job, work towards a new job, or just for personal enrichment. You have time on your hands because you can take classes online and you had a particular interest in certain disciplines and you're pursuing those interests through online education, which is awesome. Historically, we've had a teacher shortage in the United States. It's not as bad as it used to be, as most school districts are starting to pay better. Most school districts go out of their way to not just look for teachers in the local colleges, but to look throughout the United States for teachers. And here in Alabama, I was watching the news a few days ago. The Birmingham Public School District has been successful at getting people from Asian countries to come and teach mathematics and science in inner city Birmingham schools, which is pretty nice. The last decade has seen many new ideas about schooling. There have been significant changes in mass education. Information technology is reshaping schools. Obvious example is online education that we're all engaging in right now. But we have to understand that education cannot solve all the problems, including violence and rigid bureaucracy. Thank you, and please email me if you have any questions about this lecture.